Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're dissecting one of the most wildly complex and frankly bizarre internet rabbit holes out there. It's kind of like a highly mutated spin-off of the classic flat Earth conspiracy. We're going to unpack a deeply layered theory circulating online that basically attempts to rewrite modern history, physics, and geography. It is a fascinating look into how seemingly unrelated historical events can be woven together by someone desperately looking for hidden patterns.
Okay, let's dive into this because the overarching claim we're looking at today is that a sealed planetary dome is currently being guarded way down in the icy south of Antarctica. According to a recent video from a channel called A Legend, literally everything from Walt Disney movies to World War II rocketry is part of this massive, secret operating system. The claim here is that humanity once lived under an ancient dome, we broke it, and a brand new ice dome was constructed at the South Pole just to keep us all contained. To make sense of all this chaos, here's our roadmap for today. First, the polar dome theory. Second, the timeline of containment. 3, decoding the numerology. 4, fact-checking the firmament. 5, the Antarctica exit gate. And finally, number 6, the illusion of patterns. Section 1, the polar dome theory, a modern myth. So to understand this theory, you first have to wrap your head around the concept of a firmament. In ancient cosmology, the firmament was believed to be this giant solid dome vaulting over a flat Earth. Now, the source text we're analyzing today claims this wasn't just some ancient myth. They actually argue that this original dome was physically real, that it was shattered, and that it's since been replaced by a modern, highly guarded ice dome located in Antarctica. The source presents a really specific quote, basically claiming that World War II wasn't just a normal global conflict, it was a cosmic event. In this creator's mind, the V1 and V2 rockets launched by Germany were the literal first human technological piercing of the firmament dome. Seriously. They believe that when the US took over German rocketry after the war, they didn't just, win the space race. They actively built a new containment structure, a replacement firmament, managed through a frankly bizarre partnership between NASA and Disney. Which brings us to Section 2, the timeline of containment, connecting the dots? And this brilliantly illustrates the exact sequence the creator claims is a highly orchestrated symbolic architecture of dome containment. They start in 1937 with the movie Snow White, claiming the princess hidden inside a mountain by 7 dwarves is actually the mythic template for an ice dome. Then jump to 1945. That brings Operation Paperclip and German rocket scientists to the US. 10 years later, 1955, Disneyland opens, which they refer to as the New World. Right at the exact same time McMurdo Station opens in Antarctica. Finally, in 1977, NASA launches the Voyager probes, while Disney opens the Space Mountain Dome ride. To the speaker, this isn't coincidence, it's a perfectly coordinated sequence. But to connect these dots, the source makes some incredibly bizarre leaps. They argue there's a symbolic merger between Adolf Hitler and Walt Disney. They claim that because Hitler supposedly loved Snow White and Disney built Disneyland, they somehow share the exact same mythic system and breach energy. But honestly, when we can trust this against historical reality, it falls apart instantly. These were 2 entirely distinct historical figures with absolutely zero overlapping identity. Unless Mickey Mouse was secretly hiding a Panzer tank somewhere suggesting they're symbolically the same entity just to justify a flat Earth dome theory it's a massive, unjustifiable leap of logic. All right, moving right along to Section 3, decoding the numerology, the power of 7. Now, what's really interesting here is the massive emphasis the source places on a supposed signature number. The creator literally views 777 as the master code holding this entire conspiracy together. Think about how they force these mathematical connections. First, they point to the 7 dwarves. Then they take the year 1937 and somehow claim 3 plus 7 makes a 777 equivalent, which mathematically doesn't even make sense, right? They also proudly note that a dome at McMurdo Station sits at exactly 77.7 degrees south, and they completely fixate on years ending in 7, like 1937 and 1977. We really have to ask ourselves here, does releasing an animated movie in a year ending in a 7 actually prove a secret global dome architecture, or is it simply a calendar year? The critical lens we really need to use here is apophenia. This is a very well-documented cognitive phenomenon. It's essentially the human brain's natural tendency to perceive meaningful patterns or connections within entirely random or meaningless data. The speaker is suffering from a textbook case of this. By staring at history long enough, they're forcing numbers, dates, and totally unrelated events to align into a narrative that simply doesn't exist outside of their own mind. Which brings us to Section 4, fact-checking the firmament.
Science versus symbolism. Let's just look at the straight facts for a second. The claim is that V1 and V2 rockets literally breached a physical glass-like dome. Well, the historical and scientific reality is that these rockets reached suborbital space using standard, well-documented ballistics and fuel propulsion. There was no physical barrier they crashed through. Next, the claim states Operation Paperclip was all about building a new dome. In reality, it was a highly controversial but entirely terrestrial U.S. recruitment of German scientists to gain an edge in the Cold War space race. Finally, the speaker points out that rocket scientist Wernher von Braun has a Bible verse about the firmament on his tombstone, claiming this is some kind of deathbed confession. The fact is, von Braun was simply a deeply religious man expressing his personal faith, not leaving a coded clue about a planetary prison.
Section 5. The Antarctica Exit Gate. Journey to ASP-172. Let's move to and see how this builds, because the creator makes a massive, massive logical leap from actual ground-level science to pure fantasy. Step 1 is totally true. ASPO-172, located in the McMurdo Dry Valleys, is indeed a highly protected Antarctic specially protected area. Step 2 is also true. Scientists really do study the ice-covered lakes there as an earthly analog for what we might find on Jupiter's moon Europa. But then think about step 3. The speaker leaps from those basic scientific facts to conclude that because it's an analog for Europa, it must literally be a magical Europa point or an actual exit gate through the firmament. So the crucial point here is grounding ourselves back in reality. Areas like ASP-172, Lake Bonny, and Blood Falls have restricted access for a very mundane scientific reason. They are natural, ecological reserves. They're guarded to protect incredibly delicate, ancient microbial life from human contamination, so scientists can study extremophiles. They are not guarded because they contain a secret tunnel out of a planetary snow globe. And that brings us to our final section. Section 6, The Illusion of Patterns, Why We Believe. The source actually closes their argument with this quote: "The symbols are not coincidences, they are the operating manual." And honestly, this perfectly encapsulates the whole conspiracy mindset. To a highly focused pattern seeker, the world is just too chaotic to be random. Everything, whether it's a movie release date, a rocket launch, or a protected patch of ice, it all must feel intentional. It has to be an operating manual, because believing in a secret cabal controlling an ice dome provides this strange sense of order to the genuine chaos of human history. And that leaves us with this final thought. Curiosity is a wonderful thing, for sure. But when does a search for meaning cross the line into seeing patterns that simply aren't there? This explainer really shows how easily historical facts can be stripped of their context and weaponized into pure fantasy. So keep learning, keep exploring, and absolutely keep asking questions. But always ensure your critical thinking remains firmly anchored in reality. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.